Da 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 da. Telling the truth is a bad idea.
None of it makes sense. None of it.
Where they're using false diagnoses.
You sure you want to do this?
And then misrepresented sexes in order to bill insurance companies to conceal, quote unquote, gender affirming care.
You know what history does to trained physicians who ignore science.
Oh, wow.
I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder at 8 and prescribed Prozac.
What if you had to tell someone the most important thing in the world, but you knew they'd never believe you?
Their families left in ruins.
Bleeding with pain and soaking with pain.
Telling the truth can be dangerous business. Why? Why?
In June 2024, California Shasta County PA seized our 15-year-old virgin daughter, not for abuse or neglect, but solely because we refused to affirm her sudden desire to transition.
Because that's what families do. Mom, they take care of each other.
What I mean by that is back in the 70s, lesbian mothers were in a position to lose their children just because they were lesbian.
Oh, is that brilliant? Telling the truth can be dangerous business. Honest and popular don't go hand in hand.
How much money we think each patient would bring in, and this is only including top surgery. This isn't including any bottom surgery, and it's a lot of money. These surgeries make a lot of money. So female to male chest reconstruction can bring in $40,000.
And so my story is different from a lot of the others, the younger generation now, because I didn't do it because I wanted to be a man. I never medicalized except for testosterone, and the testosterone, the long-term usage of testosterone, was what caused me to have a hysterectomy and was a major contributor to those 5 heart attacks that you mentioned.
Tell the truth.
When it settles onto the ground, when we have to actually make decisions about our own safety, or as a clinician, if I'm doing risk assessment and talking to people about institutional placement decisions, sex is a part of that picture. It has to be. And I don't think there are very many trans men who don't understand that.
Tell him the truth! You lied and cheated?
I was depressed, and I had also learned that I like girls and started identifying as LGBTQ in general. So that's what led me to online.
Dangerous.
I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
And then she goes on to say in her article, if this critical misunderstanding, which creates years of disability, medical, shopping, hopelessness, and failed interventions, is unfortunate, its extension into gender medicine is tragic.
You never know what someone might believe.
Telling the truth is a difficult problem. Telling the truth is a scary. Telling the truth is a scary predicament. Telling the truth is a bitter herb.
Forget herb. I never heard of a hit that had the word herb in it.
Telling the truth is.
Hello, welcome or welcome back as the case may be. Welcome to those of you who decided to give it another try with us. We had audio problems that we couldn't resolve. Big thanks to Darla for trying. Big thanks to Extra Bulla, aka Warren, for giving it his best shot. As it turns out, it was totally on me, which is no surprise, but I had flipped a wrong switch back in there. So y'all may think it's easy having a podcast. Let me tell you, it is not. Once again, we had some problems, which is why we're so late. Once again, it's on me. There are an awful lot of buttons to push and those kinds of things. And if you stumble in the craziest place, you'll wind up not being in the same studio or whatever, which is what just happened. Sorry. And so I also want to say welcome, if I didn't already do it before, to the people who are going to watch this recorded on YouTube. It's really wonderful that you all are here and that you're interested in this topic. And so did I say that I'm Ellin Jimmerson? I don't think I did. I'm Ellin Jimmerson, and this is Moving Parts, Why Children Become Trans. And that word trans is in scare quotes. Okay, so we start out with gender news as we do every week. And so the first thing that happened was, this actually happened last week, but I didn't get to read it last week. So I think it's important enough to go ahead and tell you about it if you don't know about it. And first of all, the Department of Health and Human Services releases a report. I'm sorry, I'm distracted. I also want to tell Darla all the notes that I put in the teleprompter have disappeared, so I guess I put it in the wrong spot. So if you can just, as we're going along, just go to Media Assets at the top and work down. Sorry about that. It's on me. I get distracted. I'm also on a medication it's making my heart race and making me kind of spacey. So let's go back. The important news, among the important items, is that the Department of Health and Human Services released a report on August 13 exposing fraudulent insurance coding for sex-rejecting procedures on minors. The report examined insurance coding practices, financial incentives, and the prevention of sex-rejecting procedures for minors. It draws on the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services guidance, the Department of Justice investigations, peer-reviewed scientific literature, hospital records, whistleblower testimony, nationwide insurance claims analyses, and interviews with patients and parents. The report presents the Health and Human Services findings and recommendations about the industry pushing and profiting off so-called, quote, gender medicine. According to the report, more than 225 hospitals and health systems established pediatric gender programs nationwide. The report also analyzes nationwide claims data from 2015 through 2025 and identifies approximately $50 million in insurance claims for puberty blockers billed using endocrine disorder diagnostic code E34.9, which is endocrine disorder, unspecified. It further reports that nearly $11 million in claims for patients aged 13 to 17 were billed using a diagnosis code for precocious puberty, E301. Finding the report says, warrant additional review of insurance coding practices. Pursuant to that recommendation, on August 13th, Vice President J.D. Vance, as chairman of the White House Task Force to Eliminate Fraud, and Secretary Kennedy referred hospitals and clinics identified by the report to the Department of Justice and the HHS Office of Inspector General, respectively, for possible violations of federal law. The report recommends that federal and state agencies review coding and billing practices, strengthen oversight of claims submitted to public health programs, and refer suspicious billing activity for appropriate investigation when warranted. The report's claims, I think I pretty much said that. Okay, the full report, Wolves in White Coats, is available online, and I'll have a link to it in the show notes. The second to come out of gender news is that the Democrats are planning a decade-long strategy to push pro-transgender narrative, according to the Washington Times on August 15, out of Austin, Texas. Democrats are doubling down on their fight to convince Americans that their transgender policies should return. The plan is to hammer home stories of transgender teens suffering discrimination and humiliation, gaining sympathy from voters, and making a liability out of the expected onslaught of GOP ads attacking Democrats' transgender policy. One DNC member described it as a slingshot moment. And that member is Sam Ellin, the LGBTQ liaison for the Democratic Party. He joined the DNC after working for years for abortion rights and for Planned Parenthood. So apparently his strategy is to frame both issues as bodily autonomy issues within a civil rights framework. Now, this is interesting because of what we're going to talk about later on. The spending also targets get out the vote on pro-transgender voters. We have a model, as I pointed out, that targets 74 million folks that we know vote based off our issue set, Mr. Ellin said. Republicans have been hitting the transgender issue since at least the 2024 presidential race. That's when the Trump campaign hit then Vice President Kamala Harris with a devastating ad campaign. Kamala is for they, them. President Trump is for you. This campaign season, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton is out with an ad in his run for the U.S. Senate against Democrat State Rep. James Tallarico. Paxton's ad is a takeoff on the famous Daisy ad from President Lyndon Johnson's 1964 campaign. And if you're as old as I am, you may remember this campaign. It opens, this is in the Ken Paxton's takeoff on the Daisy ad. It opens on a black and white shot. A young girl with long blonde hair on an operating table as she's being prepared for sex reassignment surgery. In the background, the ad's voiceover says, she dreams of growing up, falling in love, becoming a mother. The girl counts as she's picking the petals off a daisy in a field. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. A doctor's voice says, keep counting. Then a gas mask is placed on her face as the doctor's surgical mask drops from his face to reveal it's James Tallarico. The voiceover says, the transient brain, which to me is just, what does that mean? You know, apparently they paid good money for this. The transient brain plays on confused children, irreversible puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, sex change surgeries. Democrats said such attack ads will backfire on Republicans as Americans increasingly embrace transgender rights, the same way Democrats brought voters to their side on gay marriage. And again, pay attention to this, because we're going to talk about this, albeit in a roundabout way, in the content of the show. Various polls show most Americans are against male-born athletes competing in female sports, with voters saying doctors should not perform transgender surgery on minors, and that transgender people should use bathrooms assigned to their biological sex. After GenSpect, the group that I follow a lot, after GenSpect posted this on X, Martina Navratilova, who is a world famous tennis player and is a lesbian, commented, "If they keep doing this, I will stop giving any support, be it vocal, financial, or actually voting." That's a pretty strong statement. And I think the Democrats need to think about what it is they're doing. And third, and the last one for today, the log cabin Republicans have voted to scrap transgender issues. We are an LGBT organization. The log cabin Republicans announced Friday that they will no longer advocate for transgender issues, declaring itself to be an LGBT organization. The influential group, the nation's largest GOP organization, dedicated to representing lesbian, gay, and bisexual conservatives and allies, voted to scrap the T after more than a decade of support for transgender issues. They did so over the trans rights movement's focus on minors. The head of the log cabin Republicans explained, "At the time, we did not believe that we would find ourselves where we are today." Ross Heminger, president of the log cabin Republicans, wrote in an op-ed for Town Hall announcing this mission shift. At the time, the transgender movement has ceased focusing on adults at all. Nearly all of their efforts and those of their aligned special interest groups focus on minors, Heminger said of what's taken place since the 2015 decision to champion transgender issues. They push schools to teach radical gender ideology. They want biological men in women's sports, regardless of the consequences. Perhaps most offensively, they support gender reassignment treatments for minors, often without the knowledge or consent of the parents, knowing full well these treatments are mostly irreversible. All right, so that is the gender news that we're bringing to you today. Yeah, all of that is very interesting. And I want to reiterate, I was a lifelong Democrat since I was a little bitty kid, because of civil rights, because of other things like that. I exited in 2012 for other reasons, but one thing that has been apparent to me is that they may not be as well. There are problems with the Republicans and the Democrats. I am neither at this point. But it is curious to me when you begin to learn the background of how we got to where we are, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do tonight's show. So tonight we're going to talk about the billionaires behind the LGBT industry. And the point that I will be making in various ways and through various means, particularly in relying on two extremely well-researched and written papers, the point I want to make is this is nowhere near a grassroots movement. This is definitely a sort of, what do you call it? Well, there's a phrase for it that has to do with sort of, not insider trading, but something like that. I can't really think of what I want to say. So anyway, I want to start with some of the points that Jennifer Bilek raised in her, her article. And I want to backtrack and bring you up to date. If you don't know about how things were different then from how they are now, you need to understand this. And so I've got a timeline here that includes the things that Jennifer pointed out, but also adds to it because I think there are some other things that, I knew about from being a historian, and I want to add that in there. So we can start with the Lavender Scare. So in the 1950s, the Lavender Scare paralleled the McCarthyite Red Scare, which caused gay men and lesbians to be branded as risks to national security alongside those who were thought to be communist. I think a lot of people know about the Red Scare, at least on the surface, but I would say most people have not heard of the Lavender Scare. But it was a real thing, and the scare resulted in the outing and firing of hundreds of gays and lesbians in the State Department. So gays and lesbians were thought to be national security risks. And that's important. And so this image, as you can see, it's got the Capitol, it's got two men embracing and two women kissing each other. And that's a scare. So then, in the 1970s, the HIV/AIDS epidemic exploded, and it became associated with gay men. This image shows how AIDS ravaged the bodies of the people who eventually died of it. And I had a very dear friend who passed away of AIDS maybe 10 years ago. It was an epidemic. It exploded. People were not interested in it because it was associated with gay men, and people thought only gay men could get HIV/AIDS. And then in 1978, just formulating this backdrop to what we're going to be talking about, in 1978, Harvey Milk was the first openly gay man to be elected to public office in California, and he was assassinated. He wasn't assassinated because he was gay, to the best of my knowledge, but for political reasons. And then in 1985, Rock Hudson, who had been one of the heartthrob Hollywood actors in its golden age, died of AIDS. It had been an open secret in Hollywood, if not among his fans, that he was gay. I think among his first roles, he was a sort of cowboy type, and then he did a string of romantic comedies with Doris Day. And so he was just kind of a heartthrob, and he was certainly not openly gay. In 1998, Matthew Shepard, a gay student in Wyoming, was beaten, tortured, and left to die in a remote spot near Laramie. He was a gay student. And then the tide began to turn, and Jennifer Bilek did not mention this, but I want to add to the fact that she also mentions the movie Brokeback Mountain. That premiered in 2005. And although it depicted two gay cowboys, they were actually sheep herders, played by Heath Ledger and Jake Gyllenhaal. They played two gay cowboys in the 1960s to the 1980s time period, and it was romantic. It was sexually more or less explicit, and so it promoted a lot of sympathy. Yet a big part of the story is that their relationship was secret, and it had to be secret in that time period. Anyway, it was just, I think it was, and I'm also curious, considering what we're talking about tonight, as to where the money came to fund it. It is still a gorgeous movie, very sympathetic, very romantic, but it does point out the secrecy that these two gay cowboys had to maintain in order to have their romantic relationship. So that gets us back to where I started with Jennifer Bilek, and she wrote an article called "The Billionaires Behind the LGBT Movement." And she wrote, and we have it there, Darla, and the next slide over next to her, if you see it. Well, do you see the slide? Yeah, there you go. Thanks. Yeah, all of this fumbling is on me, clearly, because I had notes that she can't read. So Jennifer Bilek wrote in First Things, The Billionaires Behind the LGBT Movement, and she wrote it in January of 2020. And she wrote, she opened with this: "Not long ago, the gay rights movement was a small group of people struggling to follow their dispositions within a larger heterosexual culture. Gays and lesbians were underdogs, vastly outnumbered and loosely organized, sometimes subject to discrimination and abuse. Their story was tragic, their suffering dramatized by AIDS and Rock Hudson, Brokeback Mountain, and Matthew Shepard. Today's movement," she says, "however, looks nothing like that band of persecuted outcasts. The LGBT rights agenda, note the addition of T, has become a powerful, aggressive force in American society. Its advocates stand at the top of media, academia, the professions, and most importantly, big business and," pay attention to this, "big philanthropy." And she says, consider the following case when she goes into the fact that one of the powerhouses behind this was, because of his money, was Homer Stryker, who was an orthopedic surgeon who founded the Stryker Corporation. I'm going to put a pin in that and come back to it, but I want to move on to her article was followed up some years later by, actually just this past April, by an article written by Colorado principal Physicians, and it's titled The Gender Industry's Four Horsemen of Colorado. And the subtitle is The Big Four's Colorado Blueprint: How Four Wealthy Donors Flipped Red State and artificially accelerated transgender and gender identity policies through massive funding, not grassroots momentum. And that is really, really, really important to hold on to. We're talking about billionaires. We're talking about billionaire funding. We're not talking about grassroots movements. We're not talking about individual small donations that added up over time. We're talking about a break. And so this is one of the things the Colorado principled physicians had to say on X, where they first published this, I believe. In 2004, their donations, these are the four, their donations overwhelmed Republicans. Pat Stryker, who's the daughter of Homer Stryker, spending over $850,000. Tim Gill, nearly $775,000. Jared Polis, I'm not sure how he pronounces his last name, and Rutt Bridges donated over $400,000 each. I've never donated $400,000 to anything in my life. I think the most I ever gave to a politician was in the neighborhood of $100,000. Okay, let's go back. I'm sorry, Darla, I wasn't through. No. Go back to there you go. Okay, thank you. Of $3.6 million in 527 organizations spending, nearly 2/3 came from these four. Democrats flipped both legislative chambers for the first time in decades. By 2006, that's 2 years later, they added the governorship and more seats. Total early spending exceeded $20 million, locking in a Democratic trifecta that has endured for 2 decades. The blueprint, they write, explains the mechanics in plain terms. Dubiously funded nonprofits, targeted ads, and ground games that caught the GOP flat-footed. The Rocky Mountain Heist documentary calls it a heist by a shadowy cabal. If you know what a cabal is, it's like a dark government, a shadow government. And by visualizing a blue blob spreading from Colorado as a warning of national replications. Okay, now let's back up and get a feel for who these people are. And remember, these are billionaires whose interest is in, we'll see. You want to go to the next one, Darla? Homer Stryker? No, back up. There we go. Thank you. So Homer Stryker founded the Stryker Corporation in 1941. It manufactures medical equipment and orthopedic implants. So we've got medicine in the mix. Not grassroots gays and lesbians being persecuted, but we've got big medicine in the works. Sales in 2022 for the Stryker Corporation were $18.4 billion. The shares went up 36%, have gone up 36% since 2020, with an increase in orthopedic procedures. So he is one of the deca-billionaire, he's the founder of a deca-billionaire dynasty. Forbes magazine, that you know tracks wealth, Forbes has a list of families with a net worth of $10 billion or more. His children, Ronda, John, and Pat Stryker, are a clan of one of these 45 U.S. families. There are 45 U.S. families that are in Forbes' list of decabillionaires. The Rockefellers and the Kennedys may be rich, but they're not as rich as the Strykers, according to Forbes. Okay, so his daughter, one of his daughters is Ronda Stryker. No, not his granddaughter, his daughter. She is a director of the Stryker Corporation and owns about 5% of it. What is 5% of what, $18 billion they did in sales? I'd take 1%, I'd take 0.5%. That's a lot of money. So what is she doing with this money? Is she giving out of the goodness of her heart, or is she giving strategically? So in 2011, she gave $100 million to create the Homer Stryker Medical School at Western Michigan University. She also pledged in 2016 $20 million to the Department of Global Health and Social Medicine. Okay, we're talking about health on a global scale, and we're talking about health in terms of social reasons. And so that was to the Harvard Medical School. Now we've got Western Michigan University in the mix. We've got Harvard Medical University in the mix. Watch this. In 2018, she donated $30 million to Spelman College, which, if you don't know, is an HBCU, and that stands for Historically Black Colleges and Universities, or College and University. HBCU. So now Spelman College, Western Michigan, Harvard, Spelman, and she gave them $30 million. It was the largest gift from living donors in its history. But there's more. It was earmarked for a queer studies program named after Black lesbian Audre Lorde. Okay? And of course she wants nothing in return. I said that sarcastically. If you give somebody $30 million, you do expect something in return. Now, I'm not suggesting that she's not an anti-racist, or that she's not, or that she is homophobic, in disguise. I'm sure she's not. I'm sure she's as liberated from racism as most of us, and I'm sure she is sympathetic to lesbians and gays and bisexuals. But when you name a program after a Black lesbian who's very well known in some circles, Audre Lorde, I mean, so we're getting, to me, it seems quite obvious that this is some strategic giving here. We're giving to medical schools, and we're giving to an HBCU. Okay, so her brother is John Stryker. John, I don't know why I keep writing these were his grandsons. These are his kids, I'm almost sure. But look it up. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. If I'm right, I'm right. So, John is also a stakeholder in the Stryker Corporation. And the corporation in 2024 sold $22.6 billion in medical equipment. We're up from, 18 to now $22 billion. He's also the president and founder of the Arcus Foundation. He is a gay man. And without any doubt, he has experienced homophobia, no question about that. But I don't know that really accounts for the entirety of what's going on here. The Arcus Foundation is to advance LGBTQ human rights and, watch this, the conservation of great apes. Now, this is what he wrote about the great apes. Great apes are under huge threat. They are becoming extinct in the wild, and I inserted Africa and Southeast Asia because that's where they are. That's where the great apes are. Africa, okay, are we getting this? We're now in Africa. We're now in Southeast Asia doing good things. And they are being used in the biomedical and entertainment industry, then just being thrown away. We don't use the language of animal rights. Why? Because a lot of people think that's dumb. It's more of a compassion and conservation language. There's one common ground, and I put in connecting LGBT to great ape conservation, the compassion side. Another connection is justice. Now, who can be, maybe you're not in favor of animal rights, but who could be opposed to compassion and justice for Africa and Southeast Asia? In our work for human rights, we are among those trying to expand traditional ideas of social justice to include sexuality and gender. Now watch this. In our great apes work, we often see a connection between economic development for people and ape conservation. Social justice for people can truly enable conservation. This is him speaking to the Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors about the Arcus Foundation in 2008. Let's rewind. Economic development. We often see a link between economic development for people and ape conservation. Economic development, I say, as someone who has looked into this and has written about it and done a movie about it and all the things, I can tell you that economic development is code for get into someone else's country, someone else's land, and extract their resources, and we call that developing them. The GDP may go up, but the standard of living goes down. If that makes sense. If it doesn't, we can talk about that more at another time. But this is just, so we're tying apes to conservation. We're tying LGBT rights to endangered animals, to conservation. We're tying it to doing good in Africa and Southeast Asia. And we're tying it to justice. We're avoiding the language of animal rights because that triggers some people. It's a non-starter in terms of marketing, so don't do that. And we're gonna get involved in economic development for people and ape conservation. I was thinking, you know where else I have seen this? Some years ago, I was in a book study group, and ostensibly the issue was promoting women and women's rights and women's economics. It's called Women Hold Up Half the Sky. Now, you know who was behind that book? Nike. Because it was promoting the idea that getting really poor women into Nike factories, which we know are sweatshops, is promoting the good of women, and you put on the front cover, women hold up half the sky, and all the people interested in women's rights rush to it and say, boy, that's a, yes, it lifts, sweatshops lift people out of poverty. Okay, Darla has posted this, grandchildren. Okay, what do you know? I was right in my things, my little media assets. Dr. Homer Stryker had one son named Lee Stryker. Lee Stryker and his wife Nancy had 3 children, Homer's grandchildren. Rhonda Stryker has 3 children, and Pat Stryker has 3 children. John Stryker has 2. Okay, thanks so much for that, Darla. I don't know why I do that to myself. I write it, I think about it, I write it out, and then I think, oh, I goofed that up. Oh, my fertile brain, my fertile imagination. Okay, so I hope this is making sense to you. So now we can move to the third of the Stryker siblings, Pat Stryker. Yeah, see, I put Homer Stryker's granddaughter. I did it 3 times. Why did I doubt myself? At any rate, she established the Bohemian Foundation. It's for music, community, global, and civic programs. In her life, she has given $225 million over her lifetime, mostly through her foundation. She was one of the Colorado Democratic Political Organization, along with Tim Gill, Jared Polis, and Rutt Bridges. Okay, let's move on to, and I'm going to come, she also gave, in 2016, she and John Stryker gave a combined $10 million to fund the memorial for victims of racial terror lynchings. I'm going to come back to that with a rather lengthy excursus. But first, let's talk about Tim Gill. Tim Gill is Pat Stryker's pal. He was the founder of Quark, Inc. He sold his 50% stake for $500 million. He was one of the first openly gay people on Forbes' richest people list. Today his worth is $400 million. After he sold Quark, he established the Gill Foundation in 1994, and it is based in Denver. So we've got a lot going on in Kalamazoo, Michigan, with Ronda's establishments. Now we're in Colorado, the Gill Foundation was founded for LGBT civil rights, and it funds academic research, get this, polling, litigation, and data analytics related to LGBT rights. His husband is Scott Miller. He endowed, Tim Gill endowed the Tim Gill Professorship in Infectious Diseases at the University of Colorado in 1998 for HIV research and education at its medical school. Spam risk. He is a mega donor, was one of the single largest individual donors to the LGBT rights movement in U.S. history, pledging over $500 million since early 1990s. Okay, page 2 for Tim Gill. Tim Gill was one of the primary strategists and funders behind Obergefell v. Hodges, the SCOTUS decision legalizing same-sex marriage throughout the U.S. And that's where I entered the picture. When I officiated the first legal same-sex wedding in Alabama and became the first duly ordained Baptist minister to officiate a same-sex wedding, it never occurred to me there might be more to it than just a simple victory for gay and lesbian rights. So, Obergefell v. Hodges in 2015. In 2015, he also helped fund Freedom for All Americans to advocate for non-discrimination of gender identity across the U.S. So we've shifted from gays and lesbians and same-sex relationships and rights, marriage rights, all the things that went with it, the ability to visit a loved one in the hospital, all of that. We've now shifted in that same year to gender identity. Meanwhile, Scott Miller, his husband, was named ambassador to Switzerland and Liechtenstein. He was named ambassador by the Democratic President Biden in 2022. And Biden also awarded Tim Gill the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2025. Now, some of y'all are going to think I'm just mean-spirited. And granted, I can be mean-spirited, but that's not really what I'm getting at. It's not mean-spirited to, as the little introductory video says, tell the truth. And I always giggle when they say telling the truth is a bad idea, because the truth won't get you, in terms of money and power, what money to start with will get you. Okay, now, Jared Polis. I wish I knew how to pronounce his name, even if he's not, even if I don't see him being my new best friend. I like to pronounce people's names. Polis is a Greek word meaning city or community. His actual last name is Schulz. At any rate, he's the son of Blue Mountain Arts publishers Stephen and Susan Polis Schulz. If you've ever used Blue Mountain, they have a really great line of free online greeting cards. They're awesome. Never occurred to me that it was not mom and pop business, but at any rate, in 2004, Jared Polis became one of Colorado's 4 horsemen. or Gang of Four that we talked about earlier. In 2008, he was elected to the United States Congress. He was the first non-incumbent openly gay man elected to Congress. He was the third wealthiest member, worth $122.6 million, up to $300 million over time, and he was the first openly gay parent in Congress. He was has been the 43rd governor of Colorado. So we're seeing it's mounting, it's escalating. The amount of money, the people who are in charge, they have become ambassadors. They have become major funders to a number of universities, in particular those associated with medicine. They've become, they're establishing themselves as fighters for being anti-racism fighters, and so forth and so on. Let's see, I think that's it for him. Let's move on to Rutt Bridges. I ought to know how to pronounce his name. He and I are exactly the same age, and he grew up in South Georgia, as did I. But I don't think we knew each other, at any rate. We may have even been friends had we known each other. But he is a geophysicist. He started out with the Chevron Corporation. He developed software products for the processing of seismic data for the petroleum exploration industry. Holy cow, now we're getting everywhere. In 1991, he received the Enterprise Award by the Society of Exploration Geophysicists. He is chairman of Quest Capital, a venture capital fund. So we got venture capitalists, we have billionaires who inherited big money, we have movers and shakers in politics because they organized and developed strategies to move up into democratic politics. And he's worth $200 million. I hope we're really thinking about, is the whole thing, was it a grassroots movement, or was it, is it an industry being funded by deca-billionaires? Okay, let's move on. I'm not sure. Okay, I've lost the connection. I wrote it somewhere, but don't have it in. Okay, let's try this. ILGA Europe. Let's just go with the flow. Okay, this is the lesbian ILG, International Lesbian Gay Group in Europe. And I did write it down somewhere, but as I say, I'm kind of spacey today. My heart's just been pounding, I think, from this medication. At any rate, look at this. What is the word that jumps out at you? Democracy, right? We're saving apes. We're supporting black lesbians. Democracy. We're going to tie LGBT rights to democracy. And it says, protect pride, protect democracy. And you've got this sweet man over here holding up a sign that says, abrazos de papa, which means dad hugs. Now, I have given mom hugs in my time. I'm not opposed to giving people hugs. I give them out for free sometimes. When I give them out, I give them out for free. Okay, so this is what the International Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Trans, and Intersex Association. Now you see that we've gone from lesbian, gay, and bisexual to trans and intersex. It has 500 organizations throughout Europe and Central Asia. So now we've got Africa, Southeast Asia, Europe, Central Asia. It has a consultative status with the United Nations Economic and Social Council. It has participatory status with the Council of Europe. Initially, back in 1996, it was funded by volunteers. But then in 2001, it switched to big international funding via trusts and foundations, including in the United Kingdom, the Sigrid Rousing Trust Foundation, in the United States, George Soros's Open Society Foundation, in the United States, Freedom House, which in turn receives funding from the State Department. Again, we're back to national security and all that kind of thing, as well as from semi-public and private foundations and individuals. The United States, the State Department, and in the Netherlands, the Ministry of Education, Culture, and Science. These are pretty big players. So, you know, it's really hard to continue to think, as it was for me, I had to change my mind when I learned some things, that this is about human rights, civil rights, and grassroots organizing on behalf of people who are oppressed. It's too much. You can't overlook all this big money. You can't overlook the role that these billionaires have played in connecting with politicians, with the Democrats, with and spreading out into all these different areas. And so, let's see, was there another one? No, that's it. So we move on now to the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, which is one of the foundations that Pat Stryker, it says funded, it didn't say helped fund, but let's see, what do we have to say about the Lynching Museum? So its real name is the National Memorial for Peace and Justice. Again, peace and justice. The Equal Justice Initiative. Who could be opposed to peace and justice? And one of the newspaper headlines read, Alabama Memorial confronts America's racist history, a site dedicated to the 4,400 victims of lynching and a museum about the country's legacy of inequality opens. It goes on to say, the first public museum and memorial to the victims of racial terror in the United States, specifically the 4,400 African Americans lynched between 1877 and 1950, which is curious. If you're gonna have a museum dedicated to the victims of racial terror in the U.S., and you're gonna limit it to the years between 1877 and 1950, that in and of itself is interesting. 1877, of course, marked the end of Reconstruction after the Civil War. At any rate, going on, it opens this month in Montgomery, Alabama, with the aim of reconciliation during a period of deep unrest. What kind of deep unrest are we talking about? What sort of reconciliation are we talking about? Who's going to do the reconciling? There is still so much to be done in this country to recover from our history of racial inequality, says Brian Stevenson, the founding director of the Equal Justice Initiative, who spearheaded the project. We can achieve more in America when we commit to truth-telling about the past. Does this museum tell the truth? Let me read this next paragraph. After 2 years, after 2 years of planning and construction, 2 years, that ain't grassroots. After 2 years of remember, I grew up in the civil rights movement. I know whereof I speak. After 2 years of planning and construction, and having raised an estimated $20 million from Google, the Ford Foundation, and private philanthropists, such as the billionaire activist siblings Pat and John Stryker, the Legacy Museum and the National Memorial for Peace and Justice will be inaugurated with a 2-day Peace and Justice Summit starting on 26 April. Speakers and performers include, y'all, I'm restraining myself from laughing. Speakers and performers include the activists Marion Wright Edelman and Gloria Steinem, Al Gore, and hip-hop artists The Roots and Common. I don't know anything about The Roots. I do know that I have liked a lot of what Common has done. Where in here have we mentioned Richard Emanuel, PhD? Okay, I hope that you're beginning to ask the question too, where did the T come from in LGBT? Why is this grassroots? Does it really have to do with peace and justice and lifting people out of poverty and all of those good things? Or does it have to do with expanding their already bloated portfolios? So what I'm going to do now is do an excursus. If you don't know what an excursus is, that is just, it's what seems to be getting away from the subject at hand, which is LGBT billionaire money, and into something that's unrelated. But it also is related, and I think I can demonstrate that to you. I want to say up front that I have been to the Museum for Peace and Justice in Montgomery. As you know, many of you, some of you won't, Montgomery was one of the hotbeds of the civil rights movement. There's a lot associated with South Alabama. So that's not really happenstance. That's where the Southern Poverty Law Center has been located. At any rate, I'm going to get ahead of myself. It is beautiful, no doubt about it. It is stunning, absolutely, positively stunning. What you're supposed to do when you go there is, I have learned from friends, clutch your pearls and go, oh, I had no idea. Well, I had an idea. I grew up in it. The problem with the museum is that, as I have said for a long time, for years, the museum doesn't tell the truth. It doesn't talk about all victims of racially motivated lynchings, lynching not being confined to a rope, but otherwise. And I want to go into that because this is important. Pat Stryker and John helped fund this museum along with Google and the Ford Foundation, and they don't do it not wanting to get anything back. I may be jaded in my old age, but I just don't see that. So yeah, go back to that, Darla. So here is my question. Does the lynching museum tell the truth? Does it tell the truth about racial terror and lynchings of Native Americans, of Asian and Asian Americans, of white sympathizers, of Italian Americans, of Mexican and Mexican Americans, and of Jews in America? I can tell you that it does not, because it doesn't talk about them at all. They are left out. So let's look at Native Americans. Between 1835 and 1964, at least 137 Native American or Alaska Native people were lynched in the United States. My instinct tells me that it's higher than that, but this is what has been documented. Okay, let's go on to Asians and Asian Americans. There have been multiple recorded lynchings, mostly in the American West. It happened mostly between the late 1800s and early 1900s. These were mostly Chinese laborers. So I don't know if they're being called Asian Americans out of politeness. I think most Chinese laborers were not citizens. But I won't quibble with that too much. The Los Angeles massacre in 1871 was the largest massacre of Asians in our history, I believe. I think there were 80 who died, who were killed in that massacre. There was another massacre in Rock Springs, Wyoming in 1885. Another in Squaw Valley, Washington in 1887. Another in Hell's Canyon, Oregon in 1887. Okay. Now, what about white anti-racist sympathizers? To leave out white people who were killed because of racism, because they were opposed to segregation, like my parents, and we were well aware of people being killed. My parents got death threats got threats against my little sister and me. It was dangerous, and some paid the price. And if you know anything about the period, you probably are familiar with the names Andrew Goodman and Michael Schwerner, who were assassinated in 1964, and Viola Liuzzo, who was killed in 1965, transporting people to and from various demonstrations. So what about a Richard Emanuel, PhD? He estimates that more than 1,000 whites were lynched for race reasons. Richard Emanuel, PhD, he's now retired, but he was on the faculty at Alabama State University, which is another historically black college and university, an HBCU. Alabama State University, and was a professor of communications. And he estimated that more than 1,000 whites were lynched. That's a pretty big number, and I don't have any reason to doubt it. I'd be willing to put it at 500. I'd be willing to put it at 250. But if you're going to have a museum, if you're going to be able to establish a museum in 2 years, and it's dedicated to dedicated to peace and justice in order to commemorate racial terror, and it's set up by saying in a time of deep racial conflict and reconciliation, who's going to be reconciled? Are we going to reconcile with Native Americans? Well, no, because they're not in the mix. Asian Americans will no, because they're not in the mix. Whites, because no, they're behind all of it, according to legend. Moving on. Let's go to the Italians, and I hope I get away with this picture because I could find them for all of these groups. There have been 50 documented cases of Italian Americans being lynched in Florida, Louisiana, Illinois, New York, Mississippi, Arizona, Colorado, Kentucky, Washington State. These are not isolated incidents. These were 50 cases between 1880 and 1921 that have been documented. The largest of them probably was the New Orleans mass lynching in 1891 when, I think that is these two men. Yeah. No, this is another one. Excuse me, the New Orleans had to do with some Italian Americans having been accused of conspiring to murder the chief of police, I want to say, and they were acquitted, and so vigilantes broke in to the prison and pulled them out and lynched, I think maybe 9 of them. At any rate, this photo is of the lynching of Castanego Ficarota and Angelo Albano in Tampa, Florida on September 9th, 1910. And that also had to do with, what the people who lynched him thought had been a miscarriage of justice. Mexicans. By Mexican, we mean Mexican, Chicano, Latino, Tejano. If you don't know, Chicano is the word for descendants of Mexicans who were born in this country. Latino is anybody who speaks Spanish in this hemisphere. And Tejano are children of Native Americans and Spaniards, Spanish settlers. So these would have been lynched in the late 1800s, the early 1900s. 143 in California, 160 in Colorado, some were black. Texas was a prolonged outbreak that they call La Matanza, or the massacre, in which that was between 1910 and 1920. Hundreds or thousands were killed. Part of that was the La Hora de Sangre, which was the killing of 500 by Texas Rangers in 1915. Okay, and Jews. Leo Frank is the most well-known case in American history, and he was wrongfully convicted of rape and murder, Anti-Semitism played a part in his lynching, but also the guys I mentioned earlier, Michael Schwerner and Andrew Goodman, I think they both were Jews. So do you put them in the camp of Jews? I don't think anybody knew they were Jews. Or do you just put them in the camp of white people killed because they were anti-racists and others who were suspected of being communists and not for anti-Semitic reasons? Another thing I noticed, I got these figures from my go-to, which is Wikipedia. I already knew it, but rather than going through all my books and stuff like that, Wikipedia is pretty reliable in these matters. They have lots of footnotes that you can look up. The curious thing is that on each of these pages, it says, it's got this disclaimer, most people lynched in America were black. Every one of these says that. I'm not sure what the purpose of that is, but somebody has pulled some string to get that language on each one of these pages. At any rate, Darla puts oh, right. Okay, thank you, Darla. She's giving me more information that I didn't say about the New Orleans massacre. March 14, a violent crowd in Louisiana. I think we're talking now about the New Orleans massacre. 11 Italian American men were murdered in the largest single mass lynching in United States history. And the fact that they were Italian did have something to do with it. That's not happenstance. Italians were thought to be part of the mob, all of those kinds of things. Also, I can tell you this little tidbit from my upbringing. It seems clear to us sometimes who's white and who's non-white. When I was in high school in Birmingham, I was spending the night with a friend of mine, very, very nice girl. And she said, "Ellin, would you ever date an Italian?" She said, "Wouldn't that be like dating somebody who's black?" And I'm not sure how I answered. I probably tried to avoid the question. But there is not such a clear distinction in people's minds in these matters. And I think that's important to keep in mind too. Also, I once asked a group of people about Carlos Slim. Carlos Slim is a Mexican billionaire who made his money basically with NAFTA. And I asked people, do you think of him as being white or being Mexican, or how do you think of him? And people said, well, in Mexico, he's white. In the States, he's Mexican. So, yeah, these things are, they're interesting and they can be quite complicated and complex. Okay, so I want to wrap up with a word about trans and Jared Polis, one of the 4 horsemen in Colorado who is, So here are some of the Colorado trans policies that have been enacted under Governor Jared Polis. In 2019, he became governor. He passed, where is my, Jude's Law. Okay, Jude's Law, Ellin. I did print it out. Where did I put it? Anyway, these are laws. Okay, you're going to have to look it up, and we'll come back to it. So Jude's Law has to do with, it has to do with minors and transitioning. I can't remember exactly what it is. The Kelly Loving Act has to do with making misgendering or dead naming somebody in a workplace environment against the law. What? And then there have been a number of bills advanced to seal minors' name change records. What is Jude's Law? I know it. I didn't print it out. At any rate, okay, I don't see it anywhere. All right, so we've been going for an hour and a half now. Oh, let's see, Darla. Okay. Okay, Darla's got it for me. Thank you. Jude's Law allows transgender and non-binary Coloradans to update their gender designation and legal name on state identification documents and birth certificates without needing surgery, a doctor's note, or a court order. So, I mean, again, is all of this grassroots? Are these the things people really honestly care about? Or does it have to do with decabillionaires wanting to increase their bottom lines? Does it relate to, I mean, can we see how these decabillionaires now have their hands in Asia, Southeast Asia, Africa, Central Europe, Western Europe, medicine, conservation, racial initiatives, all the things that people do care about, but I don't know that they care about where these people are going with it. I think we need to be thinking about that. If you have found this interesting, there is so much more I could say, but I think it's already been something of an overload as it is. So, be sure to like, share, subscribe. You have no idea how important that is. It helps with the algorithms, whatever algorithms are, it just helps. We need to get the word out about what's happening to these kids, but also how we got there. Do we really want a handful of billionaires to have this much power over how we think, over our system of governance? Do we really believe that going beyond gay and lesbian and bisexual actual persecution and all of the suffering, all that has gone along with that, do we really want to extend it? Can we not see that there's been an unnatural leap from gays and lesbians like Matthew Shepard and Rock Hudson and the Lavender Scare to people like Chloe Cole and Clementine Breen, the other kids that are bringing lawsuits? And my main question always, who benefits? Who benefits from the Equal Justice Initiative Museum if it's not telling the truth? Who benefits if we don't tell the truth? Who benefits if we manipulate words and manipulate people's feelings? Because at the end of the day, people are good. They really don't want people to suffer. But marketing is what it is. And the fact that our newspapers and mainstream media are not reporting like they once did, I hope this has raised some questions in your mind. If you would like to go on, I think it would be interesting, and I may do this, to jump into the meetings in Italy and to the Yogyakarta principles where all of this was attached to international law. We have to ask us, is this happening organically, or is there so much big money behind it that it's not organic? Okay, I think I've rambled on enough for now. Thanks again to Darla for hanging in there with me when I keep pushing the wrong buttons and so forth, and for looking things up when I forget to write it down. I appreciate Darla so much. And I appreciate y'all. Have a good rest of your week. Keep your eyes peeled and your ears open. Keep thinking. And I'll see you back here next week. Bye-bye.